Welcome, everyone. Thanks for watching this episode of NFFTY Connect. My name is Morgan Gruer. I am a director, animator, and creative director, and I am here with Barb Hoffman.
Yeah, hi, my name is Barb Hoffman. I'm an animator and also a director.
So, Barb, I wanted to ask you, what was the first project that made you fall in love with filmmaking?
So it started out when I was pretty young, and I think I was in 5th grade. It's really random and it's somewhat connected to what I do now, but I had this music video making app on my mom's iPad in 5th grade, and me and my friends were bored on vacation once, and so we made a music video to a bunch of random Weird Al Yankovic songs. And so we made this one to Al Suya, and it was really, really fun, and that's kind of honestly what sparked my love for film, and I just kind of thought about it nonstop ever since. How about you?
It's so funny. It's pretty similar for me. In middle school, my two best friends and I would just make weird videos. We always made some sort of music video that we tried to color grade in iMovie. They were bad. Looking back, they're embarrassing, but we got so into it and drafting up the shots and saving my birthday money for a Canon point and shoot camera. This was before phones had actual cameras. From there, I knew I always wanted to do film, but I didn't really know how. In high school, that translated into me thinking that I could act. I could not act. I could not. But I eventually transitioned into the directing side of it, and that seems like a much better fit. So it's definitely been a lifelong pursuit of weaving in and out of different aspects of film to figure out which one was the right one for me.
It's kind of interesting because both you and I do a lot of mixed media filmmaking. So a lot of live action with animation on top of that, usually being 2D. And I was just starting to dabble with it in 2019, and I was going to make this film, which is now called Keys. Yeah, and I actually reached out to you because I watched a music video earlier on in NFFTY. It was the younger girl and the older girl, and they had the 2D animation on top of it.
The Venus Project.
Yes.
I forgot that was even in the festival.
Yeah. And I messaged you and I was like, hey, how did you do this? Because I want to do something similar for my film. And you basically were like, oh yeah, I think it was you animate it and then you put it in After Effects and then you color it there. And so I just totally forgot that. And then, years later we reconnect and I'm still using your advice later on, and it's just super cool.
So funny. It's coming back to me. I remember writing that email, but I don't know why it just slipped my head as to who that was, and that feels so long ago.
It's just NFFTY is so cool, and you make connections and you learn off of each other. It's
so
great.
Funny. Well, I hope whatever I said to you was helpful. I can't I went to school for graphic design, and I took one animation class, in which I was very bad at. So my animation skills are probably not the technical way of animating. I think a proper animator would look at my files and be like, what are you doing? Everything I've learned is just trial and error YouTube videos. But I think at the end of the day too, there is a technical right way, perhaps, but as long as you can still make the output that you want, then doesn't really matter. Nobody has to know, except for that I'm expressing it here on this video. Well, it's funny because I feel that segues into something that I wanted to talk about was making films with limited resources. And I think we've both, across both of our body of work and some of the specific projects What We See in the Clouds and My Film Reflections, I think they're both a really great example of working with limited resources. And when for example, when I was making Reflections, I did not have the proper technical skills as an animator. So I thought let me stick with what I know, which is just drawing, and let me just draw a lot of frames. And I see in What We See in the Clouds, I think it's just such an excellent way to use limited resources and limited budget, and really show that like the money behind something like doesn't always matter, and it's just about like figuring out a creative idea and, you know, doing what you can with the resources that you have. And I know animation is definitely different than live action, but I think it's so awesome when I see projects like that that make me think like, oh yeah, like I don't need a huge crew and I don't need all this money to make a project. Like I can sit down on my computer and use the resources that I have and make something awesome.
Totally. I agree with that 100%. I was just thinking about that this morning, you know, because I love animation, but I think one of the hardest parts about it, and you could say that about like any filmmaking profession, a lot of it is learning how to successfully cut corners, I would say.
Yes.
Because it's just so time consuming. Even looking back now, I'm like, oh, there's a lot of more corners that I could have cut with that film, but I didn't. And I could have saved myself a lot of time. But yeah, that film was just a really simple idea. You know, it was just really easy to execute. And I think that's, you know, one of the things that I usually have to try and start with an animation project is like try to make it like too feasible almost, because like you'll run into roadblocks along the path, and something will come up and it'll be a lot harder than you think, and instead of like going overboard and doing something that's way too complicated. I'm curious, what are some techniques that you use to like save time in the animation process, or was there any breakthrough techniques that you found while creating your film?
Yeah, I mean, so for Reflections, like that was the first animated film that I ever did, so I learned a lot after that. I now have a lot, you know, many more techniques in my back pocket of how to increase efficiency. At the time, I did not. I'd say the first thing that really helped was investing in a Wacom tablet in a Cintiq, but that really helped me, like, I think not having to do it like on paper by hand, which is what I'd previously been experimenting with, really just saved a lot of time. I was so new to animation at that time, and I was like truly drawing every single frame. Now, when I go about things, I'm constantly looking for how can I loop things and repeat things and reuse things to make the time a little bit more efficient.
What animation software did you use for Reflections? Because it has a really cool watercolor effect to it, I would say.
For Reflections, I did all of the animating in Photoshop, which is not meant for animation.
Yeah, that's so
basically,
rough.
Photoshop has a timeline feature where you can do like very, very basic frame-by-frame animation, which is what I did, and then I took all those frames and brought them to After Effects where I composited it. So I did a little bit of compositing in After Effects to bring everything together, but all of the frame-by-frame animating was in Photoshop. Well, I had used some like plugins for different brushes that produce that watercolor type effect. What about you with What We See in the Clouds?
Yeah, so for What We See in the Clouds, my kind of workflow with that was that I took a bunch of pictures of clouds and then I sent them out to people and I was like, hey, leave me a message of what you see. And then for the animating part, I used Adobe Animate, which in comparison to Photoshop, you know, the beauty of Photoshop is that it's pixel-based versus vector-based animation. That's like a big topic amongst animators,
yes.
Which it's a really hard topic to explain, but basically, like if you animate with pixels, if you were to try to expand the animation to be like larger than than how you originally animated it, if you did that with pixel-based animation, it would look really blurry and really pixelated and very obviously like it was supposed to be a smaller thing, versus vector animation is used with equations, so it keeps the same pixel.
Yeah, it's more scalable.
Clarity. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the beauty of Adobe Animate, but it doesn't have that nice like textury feel to it. But it worked fine for what we see in the clouds. And I did a very similar thing where I composited everything in Premiere, and then I brought it into After Effects to add, you know, all the pretty, I don't know, texture to it.
What's your favorite part of the process?
I think my favorite part of it is like when you've completed an animation and then like it just like all starts to like come together, and it's just a really satisfying feeling of just being like, oh my god, all that hard work. It can be really labor intensive to animate sometimes, but just having that payoff of watching back what you just saw is just worth it. Totally worth it. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that's similar. Honestly, I think that I don't think I have a favorite part of the process. I think it can vary. You know, there's times when I'm animating where it feels really meditative and like I can get into that flow, and if I like forget about all the other things I have to do that day, like I can just get into some like flow state and like hours pass and I've just been animating. But that's some days. There's other days where it feels like I'm pulling teeth and it's like endless. So it can really change, but yeah, of course the payoff when you start to see your product coming together is the best feeling. But yeah, I mean, I've actually been shifting in recent years a little bit away from animation and a little bit more into the live action world, mainly because I felt pretty run down by the animation process, which is, you know, you by yourself in front of a computer screen for hours on end. I started having like, I feel like I sound like an 80-year-old woman, but I started having like carpal tunnel syndrome and like eyesight and migraines, and I was just like, this process for some reason at this moment is just affecting my body. So I've been trying to look into ways that are less intensive on my body physically and foster more collaboration so that it doesn't all fall on one person.
It's a double-edged sword because, you know, it's really nice being the only person working on a project because you know what you want and you like, you're just tunneling for that vision, and like there's no like need to waste time discussing, you're just going for that. But you know, at the same time it's extremely tiring on your body. I totally am with you. You know, I have days where I can animate for 6 to 8 hours like that. It feels like time goes by, but then there's some days where it's just like my body is aching, and I have to like, I remember I would get like a foam roller when I was animating what we see in the clouds, and like I just take breaks and I'd like lay on the foam roller with my back on the floor because it hurts. It's a lot of time just, you know, sitting and looking at a screen and animating. So I completely agree. Are there aspects of animation that you've brought into live action?
You know, obviously with live action, it does cost more money and it's harder to make by yourself, if not impossible. So you really do have to take other people's opinions into consideration. And, you know, oftentimes there's a client involved and it's not just like me and my thoughts and ideas. There's somebody paying for it and there's a brand involved and something that it needs to stand for. To be honest, for the most part, I think I really thrive when there's a brief. I think when there's like a little nugget of an idea to grab onto, I think I do really well when I have something small to hold onto and then I can expand upon it. Sometimes when it's like just me and I have all of the ideas as a possibility, I'm almost like paralyzed by indecision because I think like, well, there's so many directions it could go. Like I have no idea. I do ultimately really enjoy working with a team and being able to bounce ideas back and forth, and talking to people.
Yeah.
I think I am, and I think I'm more extroverted than introverted, and there's times where I like being by myself for the day, but there's times where I really just want to like get out and talk to another human, and that outlet definitely provides that more than animation for me.
And you have that a little bit in the animation process with like feedback. You're bringing your work to other animators and they're saying, oh, you should do this, and like that I love that. Let's do that. And you mentioned I think you've worked with some really cool clients. I wanted to ask you, like the Decemberists, in either live action or animation, how do you go around your collaborative process of working with the client? Especially, because animation, it's hard to give a lot of, or at least my difficulty, it's hard to give a lot of like variety of things you can provide because, once you go with one version, you kind of have to stick with it because you've already put so much work into it.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me with any client work is before starting is I almost always put together a treatment or a deck that shows the visual style. So like, as you said, you would never want to start animating something and then someone says like, no, let's change the style. So the biggest thing for me is really planning in advance. Whether it's animation or live action. I mean, most clients ask for it, but even if they don't, like I would always put together, like a rough script or mood board or samples and like some videos that have inspired you to like show what the look that you're going for is for that client. And then I think like trying really hard to stick to that throughout the process is important as well, so that just so that like every step of the way the clients feel like they're involved with the process. And then before starting animation, I always have a phase of, the first one is just some still frames where I draw some just no animation, just a couple still frames of what it would look like. And then I go on to do a sample animation. But yeah, so I mean, really like breaking things into bite-sized pieces that can be approved at every step of the way helps so that you don't, by the time you get to the phase of actually animating, like everything's approved, everybody's happy, there shouldn't be any surprises, and you can just go for it. Yeah, I think it's a lesson in learning how to be a good communicator and mediator really as well, because there's usually like a couple different people and different levels, and everybody wants to feel like they've had a say. How does your process change when you're working for yourself versus a client?
Yeah, I think it's just like what we've discussed before, being able to, because so much of animation is just like time. I have a time tracker on my computer, so I can literally see, how much time am I spending on this animation, so I can, know what to say to clients in the future, carve out time just for, like you said, doing pitch decks and understanding what the client wants. And that can be really hard sometimes, especially if your client's more picky than others in coming to an agreement. And then you start to ride this line is like, am I creating what I think the client wants or what I think will look good? Because then sometimes when you fall into the first category, the quality of your work can actually start to suffer.
Do you have any goals or hopes or like where you'd like to see your work go in the next year or couple of years?
I love music videos. I think the beauty of music videos, and I think like what we love to do, mixed media, is that they work so well in short form experimental. And if you're working on a 20-minute, 30, 40-minute project, you can be spending, years on that. And the beauty of music videos is that, for me at least, it's usually no more than like 4 months. And so yes. You get to like dip your toes in a lot of different styles, a lot of different mediums. So that's kind of where I'm headed. Just because I love everything film, and just that flexibility with music videos, to be able to do whatever you want and not have to write a script is amazing. Yes. How about you? What are you hoping your career goes towards in the future?
I am trying to start to dip my toes in some longer form projects, actually. I mean, during quarantine, I've been writing out a proposal for a TV series. We'll see. I mean, that's gonna probably be like a 5-year endeavor at the minimum.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I mean, besides that, I love short form. I love that it's not a huge time commitment and that you can try different styles every time. Same as you. I think that's a huge. It's just fun, and it's a huge benefit to being able to like work through different styles and try things that are relatively low stakes. I guess to wrap up, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received to filmmaking?
Wow. I was interested in film for a really long time, but I didn't start until I think in college actually making films. Besides, my very well-known Weird Al Yankovic music videos. And I think just like I feel like this piece of advice is given so much, but don't be afraid to make stuff. I feel like so much of the film industry is unfortunately pessimistic, and just saying like you have to be connected, you have to like be born a director's son or daughter in order to break into this industry. And I just like wish someone came up to me and was just like channel out all the negative talk, just saying that you can't do it, you're not going to make it, and just try, just experiment.
I think if you just like make enough stuff, at some point like one of it's going to strike. I think like
Yeah.
The first drawing that you ever make is not going to be good, and like you
Totally.
can't expect like the first film that you make to be like an Oscar worthy. I think that I try to get away from that like precious mentality of things, of feeling like every single thing that I make needs to be like coddled and precious. And I think that like it's really helpful to just try stuff, just try something. And if it doesn't work, then try something else, and eventually you'll find something that does work.